Let's say you want to get into photography, but you don't know where to start. I don't want to get into the technical stuff. Nobody wants to really get into the technical stuff when you're just starting out, right? You just want to know the fun stuff, you know? You want to really know the fun stuff about photography. You want to get excited, you know? So if I throw all the technical stuff through you right away, it's not going to be fun. You want to start fun, you know? You want to start small and you want to start with fun. It's always about fun. Fun is the most important ingredient, remember that. So there are 3 basic things you have to know about photography: ISO, aperture and shutter speed. Those 3 things determine how your picture is going to look. They're not that hard, but you have to know them. You have to really know those 3 basic things. 3 basic things that you have to know. I want to go over them in a fun way, in an easy way. Alright, so the first thing is aperture. So the aperture are the things that are closing the lens, and the shutter speed is how fast it will close. The ISO is basically fake light you're adding to your image. So this is really basic, right? I want to go into one level deeper to explain it a little bit more, what it does and what can it do for you. So what you can do with it and why it's important. All right, so the longer it takes for the shutter to close, the more light is coming into your lens. If you have a really long shutter speed, then your image is going to be very bright. The aperture is how much you will open the lens. So if you have a really small opening, it's going to be dark. And if you have your shutter speed very quickly, then there's not a lot of light coming in. Then you could say, I'm going to turn up the ISO, so adding a lot of fake light to your image. Yes, it's going to be brighter. It's going to be a very noisy image. And this is something you want to avoid. The basic rule of thumb is to put your ISO at 100. Something you should always aim for if possible. It's not always possible, not at all, but it's a good aiming point. First of all, you have to know what you are trying to achieve. Let's say you want to capture this bird or the thing you're shooting while moving. You want to capture the bird in the sky, so flying around in the sky. You want to have a clear, crystal picture of the bird flying. Then you are going to put your shutter speed very high. So it's going to take a very fast picture. So boom, boom, like a very fast. That's something you can do a lot of cool stuff with because you can freeze the image like. But the issue with this is going to let a lot less light in because it's going to take a very fast picture. And then what you're going to do? Then you are going to play around with your aperture. Wide opening is small number. So if you're going to put the aperture to a smaller number, the opening of the lens is going to be much more wider. So you get a lot more light from that. But the thing is, if you do that, your image is not going to be sharp in the whole picture. But you have to make concessions, right? You have to make some concessions. You cannot have everything. We cannot focus on all the details we have in our view. Just look around in your room where you're sitting now watching this video. Look around. You cannot focus on everything very sharp. Just do it. Just try it. Just try it. No, not everything can be sharp all the time. And that's good, that's fine, because then you have a focus point. The focus is going to be on the bird itself and not really on the background, because the background is less important. High shutter speed, so maybe like 2000. Whoop. And then you're gonna put a wide aperture, so a low f number, so let's say 1.8. And then still it can be a little bit too dark because it's going to close very fast. There's not a lot of light that has the possibility to come in, right? So that's something you have to keep in mind. Then you can play around a little bit with the ISO, so adding fake light to your image. But be careful with it because you get a noisy image with it if you use it too much. But it's fine, most of the new cameras, they can deal with a lot of high ISOs, and that's very cool because then you have this very sharp picture of a bird flying in the air with movement. You can do this with holding your camera in your hand because the shutter speed is going to be very high. These things are very cool to learn because you can do different kind of stuff. Because if you're into sports maybe, then a high shutter speed is something you're gonna use a lot. But if you're not into sports or anything moving around, then a high shutter speed is, you're not gonna use it a lot. But the thing is, you have the freedom to do so. And that's something I really love about photography because you can do lots of different styles of photography, a lot of different techniques to it. These are some of the techniques you can use for different styles of photography. this is something to keep in mind when you're trying to get into photography. These are things you have to master, and you have to try them over and over and over again. So it also depends on what you're trying to capture, right? So if you're really into sports, use a high shutter speed. And if you're really into landscape, try different settings. You have to try it out. And that's the basic thing of photography. You have to just do it. You cannot buy a camera and be good at photography. You can have $1 million equipment, but that doesn't make you a good photographer. You have to get out there and just shoot anything. And it's also part of the fun, you know, it's all about the journey. And don't forget that, never, because everything is about the journey. Watch more videos of photography, buy books, do courses, do anything that makes you a better photographer, that you can learn. So it's very important to keep on learning. Never stop learning. Never. The greatest part about photography is that you're never done learning, actually, you know, and it's something I really love, because once I get into product photography and I get a little bit better at it, and then someone is asking me to take a portrait, for instance, and then I think, I've never done that really before, but let's try, let's do it. And then I go on YouTube and search for portraits, and then I have to search what kind of techniques, what kind of shutter speed, what kind of aperture number I have to put in, what kind of ISO, what kind of backgrounds, all that kind of stuff is out there on YouTube, you know, it's really fun and it's for free. All the information you can find is for free. Photography is a really big industry. You can find all sorts of kind of stuff. Alright, so a small recap. So aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. The shutter speed is how fast it will take the picture. High shutter speed, so let's say 2000, boom, but let's say 2 seconds, 1, 2. So it's depending on what you're shooting and what you're trying to achieve, depends on your settings. So if you want to capture something moving, a bird flying in the sky, boom, high shutter speed. So aperture, the things are closing your lens. That's the aperture. A high f number is going to be a small aperture, small one, so a very tiny hole that the light is coming through. So your image is going to be a lot darker. So let's say f14. It's going to be a very small hole that the light is coming to go through. Remember that. ISO, fake light adding to your image, but beware to not overdo it, because your image is going to be noisy. It's not going to make your image a lot better. But sometimes you have no choice and you're going to add a little bit more fake light to it so you have a brighter image, which is very cool to do. It's very cool that you can do that. Alright, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something, and if you did, please leave a comment, give a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.